Hello everyone and a very good morning to you. This is Rachel live from Kalkine Studios and you're watching The Early Trades, a show where we share with you a glimpse of the Australian share market in their opening trade scenario, along with the global and domestic drivers triggering market momentum. Later in the show, we'll take a look at prominent newsmakers grabbing headlines during the early trading hours. The Australian share market opened lower this morning, pulled down by weak commodity prices, while investors await the Reserve Bank of Australia's monetary policy meeting later today. The concerns over fast-spreading Delta variant of the coronavirus weighed on US stocks, crude oil and treasury prices in the overnight trade. On Wall Street, the stocks reversed early gains and ended modestly lower. The S&P 500 added 0.18%, the Dow Jones declined 0.28% and the Nasdaq Composite added 0.06%. The weakness in US stocks was witnessed despite the market initially cheering announcements on Sunday by US senators of almost $1 trillion proposed infrastructure stimulus. In addition, strong corporate profits and optimism around economic recovery failed to support the markets during the trade. US manufacturing continued to record growth in July, even as the pace weakened for the second straight month. That's according to a survey from the Institute for Supply Management. Looking over to the bond market now, treasuries declined following a muted manufacturing data and spread of the Delta variant of coronavirus. Benchmark 10-year notes climbed 18 on 32 counts in price to yield 1.18%. However, these are still down from 1.24% late on Friday. The dollar fell towards the one-month lows hit last week after the Fed provided clarity that it may not tighten monetary policy anytime soon. As a result, the dollar index fell 0.028% on Monday afternoon. Let us now skim through the opening trades of the ASX 200. The bottom performing stocks in the index were PointsBet and gold player Perseus Mining. PointsBet shares edged lower after selling equity to institutional investors. Meanwhile, Perseus shares slid after broader gold stocks sell-off. Evolution Mining and Corporate Travel Management also traded under pressure. Meanwhile, the IT sector was the leading gainer on the board. Afterpay, Zipco and Appen led the gainers pack. Shares in Chalice Mining and Redbubble also advanced. Moving on to our next segment now, let us glance through the ASX sectoral charter in more detail. Australian energy players Beach Energy, Santos, Woodside Petroleum and Oil Search all traded in the red zone during the early trading hours. That's amid an oil price downtick. Crude oil prices edged lower in overnight trade on weak economic data from China and the US. Concerns were also raised on higher crude output from OPEC producers. As a result, the prices fell almost 3%. While Brent settled down at 3.3%, US crude slipped 3.6%. Let us now move to the miners space. Heavyweight miners, the BHP Group, Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals, their shares all slid lower. While China's ferrous futures declined on Monday, that's amid China's dedicated focus on curbing steep outputs. Meanwhile, according to China's updated stance, the country should avoid campaign-style carbon reduction efforts. On Monday, the China International Capital Corp, one of the country's biggest investment firms, warned of further pressure on iron ore prices as China's domestic steel production is set to ease. Benchmark iron ore futures closed 0.9% lower. Meanwhile, copper prices fell on Monday on weak factory data from the US and China. Moving to the yellow metals space, Newcrest Mining, Evolution Mining, Ramelius Resources and Gold Road Resources, their shares all edged lower, and that's despite the gold price rising overnight, supported by a weaker dollar and US bond yields. Spot gold fell 0.1%, while US gold futures ended up 0.3%. Moving on to the tech space now, wax components, WiseTech Global, Afterpay, Appen, Altium and Xero all traded higher. They're taking cues from upbeat momentum of Afterpay and Square. And in the financial space, the top four banking stocks, that's the ANZ, the Commonwealth Bank, NAB and Westpac, they all traded lower ahead of the RBA's monetary policy meeting later today. Healthcare and the industrial sector also edged lower. Now it's time for a very short break, but stay tuned. I'll be back with more updates from the Australian share market.
Hi there, James Preston for Kalkine TV. Are you into gaming and virtual reality? Does AI and the endless possibilities it entails capture your interest? Or are you constantly trawling through the web to try and discover the latest updates and innovations in the tech space? Well, let us do the work for you. From the latest product launches to shocking affairs on the World Wide Web, exclusive interviews and information about the top companies like Apple and Google to brand new tech startups vying for your attention. Kalkine's Tech Beat has the latest in what matters in the world of technology. Join me every single Monday on the Tech Beat, exclusive to Kalkine TV.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Rachel, your host live from Kalkine Studios, and you're watching the Early Trade Show, where we share with you a glimpse of the Australian share market opening trade scenario. Moving on to our last segment of the show now, let us look at a quick highlight of the prominent ASX stocks under the spotlight during the early trading hours. To begin with, airline operator Qantas shares slid lower. That's on their decision to stand down 2,500 of Qantas and Jetstar employees for around 2 months. This has been forced by border closures and the COVID-19 outbreaks. The employees include airport workers, pilots and cabin crew. Next up, a real estate player, the Crownwell Property Group, remained under the spotlight today. The company announced that its chief executive, Xavier Walsh, will step down from his role on the 20th of August this year. That's after less than a year in charge. However, he will remain in the system to assist the company until his employment ends on the 9th of December. Moving on, online bookmaker PointsBet, their shares edged lower. That was on selling equity worth $81 million to institutional investors. And they will now open a retail entitlement offer this week to be closed in 2 weeks' time. Meanwhile, shares in energy player Cuba Energy soared on reporting 21% increase in the sole gas field production in July 2021. That's compared with the average of all 4 quarters of financial year 2021. The primary reason was due to a better performance at the Orbost gas processing plant. The Sole gas field in the Gippsland Basin recently became the first new offshore gas development in southeast Australia to start production in the last several years. And last newsmaker on our list is the world's largest independent mining equipment rental business, Emeco. The company has completed a full repayment of its 9.25% US notes worth a whopping $180 million. The repayment was funded from the notes issued and cash reserves of the company. So that's all on the major market movers. Looking at specific market drivers for the Australian share market now, the domestic investors are closely tracking the Reserve Bank of Australia's monetary policy meeting later today. Australia's central bank may withdraw its decision to taper bond buying program if Sydney remains in a coronavirus lockdown. That's according to economists. RBA had earlier said in June that it would reduce its debt purchases from September due to better than expected economic outcomes. The Australian Bureau of Statistics will be releasing data on lending indicators and building approvals later today. Tomorrow, they'll release figures for retail trade for June and also international trade and payroll jobs and wages data on Thursday. And of course, the reporting season will be closely evaluated this week to gauge the winners and the losers. So that's all for now from the early morning trade. Stay tuned to Kalkine TV as we have many more shows lined up for you, sharing live updates across the economy, markets and sectors. I'm Rachel, signing off for now.